Thanks, Doug and Grant. Thank you very much this morning. There you go. Let's get this. So glad to see so many people that I know, some old timers, young timers. That doesn't mean you're old. That just means I've known you for a while. But I'm really glad to see all my friends here, and especially, what do you think, people that hadn't been to Wax Space before? What do you think about this? You know, what do you think? And Tyler Station is a pretty amazing place. It kind of happened on its own. You know, it kind of happened because of you, because of the neighborhood here. So we're going to take a little tour today, and we're going to talk about Tyler Station, and we're going to talk about how to really cultivate neighborhoods and build wealth for locals. And we call it Gentlefication instead of gentrification. And Gentlefication is when the locals get the wealth. It's when the locals do the building and take care of their communities instead of the guys from out of town. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, you know, this started out as the Dixie Wax Paper Company back in the 20s, and some of you, especially Elmwood, thanks to Elmwood, this place did get shut down at one point, but it didn't start off bad. So first of all, I want to introduce myself a little bit. I've done a little bit of everything as far as real estate goes. You know, I'm a property manager, I'm a leasing agent. We acquisitions, we do development, we do construction. So we're kind of like an old-fashioned development company. And we're a community development company for profit. And I always say, what's the most important thing in this business? The most important thing is making money, but doing good is equal. So I said that again, the most important thing is making money, but doing good is equal. Because without making money, you can't do things, you can't experiment and do things like Tyler Station. So these days I spend a lot of my time traveling around the country teaching what I do through an organization called Neighborhood Evolution. And we teach cities and small developers, community developers, to come together to build their community. And so if it takes a village to raise a child, it really takes a whole community to develop a building or to develop their neighborhoods. So some of our projects, and most of you know this, but the Texas Theater was something I worked on. I started working on it in 1999. It only took us 10 years to get it open, right? So today, though, it's back in the hands of the private sector. You know, it's no longer, it pays taxes. It's one of the only small movie theaters that actually makes money in the United States. And of course, the Belmont Hotel, we'll talk a little bit about that today. I have some bad, regrets with the Belmont, but we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. Some of the projects, like in Bishop Arts, the Glorious building, restoring that. We've done tiny houses. We're building in downtown Duncanville, Lancaster, DeSoto, all around the area. So I'm going to hit gentrification right off the bat, and then we're going to back up and look at Tyler Station. This is one of my favorite streets ever, and my good friends own this street, and they owned it for multi-generations. And this street had duplexes and apartments and single-family homes, and people lived together. And just imagine today if the people that own this would have sold these little buildings independently to you and to you and to you. Imagine if they would have done that. First of all, I think they would have made more money. And secondly, this wouldn't have happened. Okay, this is what it looks like today. Now, what's it going to look like in just a few months? Like this. So we're going to extract the local wealth and put it somewhere else, California, or with the Ohio State Teacher Pension Fund, or whoever owns these properties. And I'm going to give you an example in a minute of what we could have done. And there's a guy here today, an entrepreneur today, that helped me do that, and I'll introduce him at the end of this. So, Dixie Wax Paper Company back in the 20s. It was owned by the Kemple family, and they were good local entrepreneurs. They were involved in the Chamber of Commerce. They ran a good business, a clean business. They did good things for a couple of generations. And then, as many businesses do, a couple of generations down the road, they sold it to Dixico, okay? And then Dixico, the big, bad corporation, came in, and those that from Elmwood here that helped end that time, they were polluters of the air, they were polluters of the ground, and they were polluters of the creeks. In fact, down the creek, some of the old timers can tell you about down the creeks, how everything died down these neighborhoods. And the Elmwood neighborhood here, the local neighborhood, got this thing shut down. And so that was back in the 80s. And when I bought it, or when our group bought it, my partners and I, we sealed up the last of 9 monitoring wells. So the soil's still contaminated here, but it's not hurting anything. And it's so, and we're an innocent owner, you know, so we didn't, if we tore it down, we would have had to haul it off to Louisiana or somewhere. Why does Louisiana always get the, you know, or Arkansas, why do they always get the bad stuff? So along the way, DART came in, and DART put our private station in here. I mean, we don't have a parking lot around here. We in Elmwood and Wynwood, we have our own private DART station with Tyler Station here. In fact, DART didn't even have it on the radar. DART decided this was a non-station. And since Tyler Station's opened up, the ridership has increased like triple since Tyler Station opened up, and it's now on their map and on their radar. So Delta Industries bought this after it was shut down. And Delta Industries, what they did was they rebuilt alternators and air conditioners. And they built them, they didn't use this top floor because the roof leaked so bad. They used the bottom floor so the water wouldn't get on them. So they didn't fix the building for many years. So when we first came in here, it was full of water and dead raccoons everywhere, and you couldn't see. And all the windows were covered up. As you can see on the front of the building here, all the windows were covered up. You see the bottom picture on the right, that's where 2000 Roses is today. And the top one is where Movement HQ is. So here's what the people that were selling at Delta Industries, they were gonna sell this, and they wanted to sell it to a real estate developer who would develop this, and all the people that came along wanted to build apartments here, right? This is the Lancaster Road apartment project over there by the VA hospital, which was called a transit-oriented development. So with the train station here, perfect place for a transit-oriented development, they would have looked like this. So you had had, you know, more transients, you know, again, wealth is owned by somebody from another state. That's what nearly was here. That's nearly what happened. Because nobody thought that you could actually make this thing work financially. You couldn't divide it up and you could make it work financially. And we're going to see how we did that. So here we go. Here's the map. And I look at this map, and I really like this because I look at it and see all these little great neighborhoods that I grew up loving my whole life. I grew up at Polk and Camp Wisdom down south of here. So I traveled up and down Polk my whole life, up and down, you know, to the Texas Theater and shoplifting on Jefferson. I mean, shopping on Jefferson. Yeah. But we grew up, you know, going up and down to the Belmont Hotel. You know, my dad worked, and we'd eat breakfast up there. So the interesting thing about this, it's an industrial zone property in the middle of a neighborhood, which meant I could do just about anything here. So except for residential, I couldn't do residential, but I could do just about anything. So there's what it looked like when we started. And my partner here, who's here somewhere, Gary Buckner's around here. Where's Gary? Here's over here. Gary, there's Gary. So Gary and I had been talking for years about a makerspace. And we had looked at several buildings, and Gary built furniture for me at the Belmont Hotel. And Gary's an artist and a furniture maker, and he had all kinds of creative things. And so Gary and I had been talking about this and scheming for years and years. And so this was a perfect opportunity because of Gary's influence. We really did this project. And Gary was the first tenant down in the bottom on the east end, and he's still there today. And then this other guy came along. I had this other guy, there's Joel. Back when I met him, he had short hair and he was clean cut, you know. But he's been in the brewing business now for a few years, so he's got long hair. But Joel was some kind of fancy code writer for the Food and Drug Administration. He's one of these guys that could break code and do things. And the story, it's a little story in a minute, I'll tell you about him because he helped us make this happen. So I had him as a tenant in my hip pocket. So Joel is a tenant in my hip pocket and Gary is a big tenant. Both of them taking about 25% of this building, made my financing easier, okay? Having those two tenants in our hip pocket made it happen. So Tyler Station LLC was born in 2016 when we closed on it. And you can see the front of the building, the way it looks. And so here's the way it happened. I'm going to give you the inside secret today on financing and how to do stuff incrementally. Because if you would have brought the pictures that I'm going to show you in a minute to any bank, anywhere, and said, we're going to break this up into 70 different businesses, they would say you're crazy. And so they're never going to give us the amount of money we needed for a loan. So we had to break it up into pieces. So what we had was we had the influence of Gary of doing this, and another guy named Hugh Resnick, who's passed away, but some people here might know Hugh Resnick. Hugh was a real estate broker. He wasn't a developer, but he kept calling me on the phone every day and said, Monte, when are you going to buy that building? When are you going to buy that building? And I said, Hugh, I don't know. I mean, that's like, this thing's crazy, you know? I mean, what do we get? You know, what do we do? And so finally he came over one day with a check for $100,000, and he laid it on my desk and said, I'm your first investor. Do this deal. And because of Hugh and because of Gary, this thing moved forward. So we bought it for $1.8 million, for $1.8 million, and we raised about half of that, I think, or a little more than that, in cash from Hugh and some other investors, partners of mine. And so we put another $1.2 million in improvements in there. Well, the improvements, it was only a little bit because it got us a roof, and it got us some electrical, and it got the building cleaned out, and got all the environmental out of here. And so that's all we could get. So then we were stuck there. But we had a couple of tenants come along at that time. We had Pink Jacket. Some of you may remember those guys. And of course, Gary signed a lease as Stash Design. He's a partner with me in the real estate, but his company also leases space. And then we had Oak Cliff Brewery as a tenant. So with those tenants, we're able to begin to start work on this and then get the next phase of financing, which I'll show you in a minute. And this is what it looked like when we showed up. And there was 500,000 pounds of smokestack equipment on this roof. I mean, this thing was a heavy polluter. And we took it down. These things are big as cars, some of these things that came down off the roof. And we stacked them up out in this parking lot. And, there was all kinds of weird dust and stuff inside these things. I don't know what it was. It wasn't asbestos. There was plenty of asbestos in the building, and we had that removed properly. But it had to be bad, whatever we were breathing. And so this is the north side of the building, which you see over here today. So you can see it had those docks were old loading docks from the days before DART, when the Santa Fe rail line came through here, and they would pull off the rail. They would unload their chemical in here, and those chemicals would then become packaging for potato chips and cups and other things. There was, down in the brewery where the tall ceilings are, there was gigantic vats that would sit on their side, and I just can only imagine, what was in those. And you could smell it when you went in there. You could smell the chemical. And so there's another shot of the north side, the way it looked, and then there's the dark wall, and the windows above there are the event center today. And I believe this is place at Tyler, what you're looking at there. See, and you can see the water on the floor because it flooded every time. In fact, just sweeping the water out of here, a couple of people got sick, just sweeping the water out, just, from the water being on their feet. And I'm not sure where that's at, but I think that's downstairs. And then here's some of the other places upstairs. That's in the brewery. And this wall right here. See those two windows right there? They were all covered up. And so it was so amazing when we took the brick out and you got light into the building, what light and air do. And this is looking down that direction. We look down through here and saying, well, what are you going to do in here, Monte? Well, we don't know. We don't know what we're going to do. We're going to figure out how to lease it to somebody who would lease the space. And then that's when we came up with the idea of manufacturing meets collaboration. And I like to call this collaboration village here, because there is so much interaction and collaboration. There is workforce development going on here without an executive director. There is entrepreneurial development going on here without anybody running, with no overhead. And it's happening from each other. And most of the people that are in this building, that are renting in this building, they're neighbors. They're all neighbors here. Okay, so they're all local. So if you imagine this, imagine back in the 20s when we opened this up. We have a manufacturing operation with an office, and you have research and development, and you have marketing and advertising. You have manufacturing. Okay, you've got a place for your employees to eat, a lunchroom. You've got a place for people to work out. You've got this little village. It's just the same thing today, except we chopped it up into little bitty spaces and it's 70 different tenants. So it's actually the same thing that we have today that we started with. And so Tyler Station began to open up, and you can see the difference between the dart line, what it was, and then what it became today. The guys that did this work with us, I wish they could be here today because they're like real heroes, these guys, because there's a very small crew of Kerry McManus and David Pickett and his crew, a really ragtag bunch of guys who knew how to use equipment. So a little bitty small crew of like 5 people did this whole job incrementally over time. So when we'd get a tenant, we'd say, run over here and do the space. And if you that were in here would remember seeing just one space by itself. And then we'd get another tenant, we'd run back over here and finish their space. And so each time we would finish it, we would have more cash flow. And so the money went like this. So in phase 2, our original lender was a bank in Fort Worth, and we went back to the bank in Fort Worth. We said, hey, we need some more money, but we got some more tenants. So with more tenants, income property is valued by the amount of income you get. So the more income you get, the more money I could borrow. And so at the time that we did this, Wax Space became a tenant, the Wax Space here. Sean Springer, another furniture maker. Crumb and Kettle came. TX Studio came. Think Branded Media came. The Movement Studio, HQ Movement Studio, which was Oak Cliff Kai. Ray Cole, the barbers. And Arbor Steaks, who's an inventor, who, if you don't know him, he's an inventor who invented stakes that hold trees up that are biodegradable, who's downstairs. And we were able to get another $1 million. Still not enough. Phase 2 financing, so stay tuned. So this is what it looked like before and after, where we're at. And in this building, we've got lots of artists. The art hanging on the wall over here, the art on the end of the building done by Kyle Steed. Downstairs, we've got some 15-year-old artists downstairs next to Kyle. We've got lots of creative people in the building. And then the cattle panels, these are cattle panels with cages, and people kept saying, don't call these cages, but what are they? They're cages, they're cattle panels with cages, but they're done really well. We cut them right inside the metal. And at first we did this because it was less expensive, to do. We didn't have to. I'd had office buildings in the past, and every time a tenant moved out, you'd have to take the sheetrock down, you had to put carpet in, you had to adjust the air conditioning, the sprinkler system, all those things. By doing this, we could do it one time, and that would be it. And we could move walls a little bit, move them around. But the really benefit of this was the collaboration. I had gone to an artist studio over in Deep Ellum with sheetrock walls, and I'd walk down the halls, and I never saw an artist. I never saw anybody, and there was no life. And this thing here with the openness, which sometimes the sound's a problem, I'll admit, sometimes we have problems, but the collaboration of seeing each other work way outweighed the problem. And so these open panels made it really such a good place, because I can walk down the hall and I can see people, and talk to people, and I'm carrying people with me, and people love this place. By the way, people come from all over the country to study Tyler Station. And so we got, graphic artists, we have filmmakers, we have makers, wood makers and metal makers, and we have architects, and we have candlestick makers and coffee makers, and just manufacturers, and we got all kinds of people in here. If you haven't ever been down to Gary's shop down there, it's a pretty amazing place. What happens down there? But Gary and I actually thought that this thing would be full of, a lot more of those kinds of people. But what happened is we had a lot more office users and retail users than we thought we would have. And we purposely didn't put restaurants in here. And the reason we didn't, we knew Bishop Arts and Elmwood would both develop. And Bishop Art was already overbuilt in restaurants. And we wanted Elmwood to develop. And so we wanted to be a stop here where you got a vending machine, and you got maybe a trailer downstairs, but it wasn't the place you went for dinner. It wasn't the place. And so we wanted to put pressure, send it out to those places, and we didn't want to compete. So we wanted to be the Bishop Arts friends and the Elmwood, we wanted to be their friends. And so then the brewery, this is Joel, I think this is Joel here. He's actually using his saw. And let me back up with Joel. When we went to the city, so those of you that have ever taken a plan to the city, and you show them this, and you said, we're going to have a welder down here and a baker next to, close to each other, and people cutting hair, and CBD shop, and a pet. We're going to have them all together, and they're going to be divided by these. They said, no way. You can't do this. But this guy, Joel, okay, he's not an architect or any of those, or a zoning guy or nothing. He's a code hacker. I call him a code hacker. That's not what he is. But he actually dove into the code and figured out the loopholes, all the loopholes to get this done. And so, today there's just, it's amazing. We couldn't put residential in the building, but we do have some residential out in the trailer outside. So there they are. They're starting to can beer here now. I've got a few photos I took from Doug and Grant from TX Studio here. So he's canning beer starting now. And here's Hazel's Movement Studio here with the boxing ring. And there's their group there. And one of the guys there is Daniel Nanasi, who's a filmmaker here. So he just came in a minute ago, but he's here in the building. And then we went back to the bank again. So you can imagine you've got this thing, and you're going back to the bank. So we've gone to the bank twice, and the Fort Worth Bank just said, we're done. We don't understand what you're doing. Who are those people that are over there in that building? And so we had to go to a new bank. So we went to Dallas Capital Bank, and they came out, a bunch of guys from North Dallas in suits, and come out and looked at this, and they looked at a bunch of our stuff, and they gave us the money. They gave us the next stage of the money. And during that time, we got Paul Clark, we got Green Pets, and many others. And I say Lisa Lee here. Lisa Lee lives in one of the trailers over here and watches the place. And Lisa Lee earned my respect a couple of years ago when we had a couple of birds fly into our transformer here, and we had really old equipment, really old, but you could still use it. You just couldn't buy any parts for it. And these birds flew into the transformer and shorted the whole place out. I mean, like $150,000 in damage they did. And the worst thing is, this was right after we were coming out of COVID, and we couldn't get the parts for 45 days. So the building was going to be shut down for 45 days. I said, we can't do this. Our people are already suffering, coming out of COVID. So we got one of them big old trailers. You use its hurricanes, the big generators. We had these gigantic, wires. This thing set out in the parking lot, these gigantic copper wires, and we plugged this building in, and we ran it for 45 days, where we were shut down for 48 hours. And Lisa Lee, who's here, and she's usually around here somewhere, Lisa Lee sat every single night out in the parking lot and watched those copper wires so nobody would steal those wires. And I stayed on the phone with her, all night, just about every night. So there's Paul. He's a fireman and a coffee maker. And then we got Bike Synergy Underground. I think the only really bike shop south of the Trinity River, maybe one in Cedar Hill, is here today, in Tyler Station. And it's down in the dungeon, call it the dungeon down there. And there's Jorge. And then there's our bookstore here, and there's artists, all these. You've seen all this stuff. I'm not going to waste a lot of time with this. There's just some good photos of some of the work we did here. Now, when we did this work, see these storefronts? See all these storefronts? They're solid steel. They're not aluminum. And we built all of that stuff. We built all that stuff right here on site. And so the spaces, the way they're laid out in a way that was kind of natural. It said we would walk through the building. When we laid this thing out, said, okay, the architect would follow us. We'd say, draw a line right here, build the wall here. And the architect would draw it. And we'd send it into the city. And so when it was designed, it was really designed as we evolved and as we moved over time. So there's some more photos. And now go back to the bank one more time, back to Dallas Capital Bank. We just needed a little bit of money to finish off a few details. And by that time, it was so quick that this thing leased up to 100%. I mean, it was amazing it leased up to 100%. Now, I get the credit for leasing the building up, but the building leased up here because of Gary Buckner, because of Doug and Grant, and because of people like Hazel and the people that were here. They referred the people that came here. See, everybody came, and people in Wynwood and Elmwood, they're the people that leased this building up, by your word of mouth. And today, that's who is going to be the new owners of this building one day. Because see, when I sold the Belmont in 2015, I sold it to two hotel entrepreneurs, Matt Comfort from New York and Jeff Burns from Austin. They were two hoteliers who had agreed with me that they would continue to operate it as it was, just take it better. They had more money than I did, and they were going to just take it up a notch. Just stay on the same trajectory, just take it up. Well, they had a trust fund kid. Okay, he's an adult, but I call him a kid because of what he's done. But he loaned them the money. And then they got in an argument, and he kicked them out. And then he turned it into his personal playhouse. And then when COVID came, it was just too much trouble. It didn't mean anything to him. I mean, several millions of dollars didn't mean anything. Didn't matter to him. And he shut it down. And so they couldn't operate it. They didn't know how to operate it. They didn't understand how personally we were involved in the operation of the Belmont that made it what it was. So, that being said, in the spirit of gentrification, okay, I regret selling the Belmont. I will tell you that. Okay, now it took all my money in the early days to operate it and keep it going. So I needed to sell it so I could do Tyler Station, and I could do other projects that I do, Beckley Settlement, other things that I'm doing today. But what I committed to do here was to sell this building over time to the entrepreneurs that are in here. And so Gary is on one end, is a partner and owner of the building. And now today, Doug and Grant and Matt, is Matt here too? Matt Glenn, the attorney, Doug and Grant and Matt Glenn bought out another one of my partners. And so today, not only are Doug and Grant tenants in the building, they're also now partners and owners in the building. And so I hope one day, as I graduate from this life, that other tenants will come in and will have the opportunity to own this thing so we can have this thing go on for a long time and it not fall in the hands of the Ohio State Teachers Pension Fund and some brokers, some Wall Street brokers and people like that. Because that's what happens. You realize that what's happened to these big buildings that are built over here in Oak Cliff right now in Bishop Arts? So, what happens is a local promoter, I call them a promoter, I don't call them a town maker or town builder. They're promoters, they build them, they lease them up, and they don't have any money in the deals, and then they sell them to a broker who represents the Ohio State Teacher Pension Fund. Okay, you know how the Dallas Police and Fire got in trouble a few years ago? So it's people with no money, brokers, selling stuff to each other to the detriment of teachers or firemen or policemen. And so that's what happens over there. And I like this here. This is one of my favorite pictures. This has got Doug in it here, but this was an article done not too long ago on this, and I love this statement because, and they didn't even talk to me. They came here and talked to all the tenants, and they called it a magical co-op building, and it is. And so, what does that mean? How do we stop gentrification? We stop it like this. Imagine this for a moment. What if in Bishop Arts, in the early days, when the developers in the Chamber of Commerce was the ones who actually got the zoning changed over here, what if we did this? What if we said, we're going to put a lid on the height, okay, of all the buildings? We're going to put a lid on it. And we're not going to let you take blocks and make them into super blocks. So you got to keep them small. You know what happened? None of those big developers would have came here. You know what would have happened? Guys that like own this building here, local guys. See, here's the barber and the juice shop in the front. and here's 2 small apartments in the back. I mean, this is old school stuff. This is what you see on Jefferson. One of the best urban streets we have in all of the whole county, Jefferson Boulevard. You know, it's a perfect urban street. I mean, it's got the perfect median and the perfect sidewalks and the perfect head-end parking. The buildings are up against the street except for Fiesta. You know, I mean, but you know, when Sears was here, y'all remember Sears? Y'all remember? Sears was perfect. You know, it was up against the road. Guys like this, who's here today, the guy in the purple shirt here is J.C. Juan Trejo over here, who is a young barber entrepreneur that I met a few years ago. He has a barbershop on Edgefield over here north of Davis. He's got a barbershop on Hampton. Over here, he's got this building he owns. He's a barber who's a landlord now. He's your neighbor. He's the owner. The wealth is built here. He's got your affordable housing. See the affordable housing in the back? Doesn't always have to be on top. There's your affordable housing, 400 square foot units, rent for $800 a month, $700 a month, you know, which is cheap today. Used to didn't be cheap, but it's cheap today. And he has a barber school in this building, so he's a local guy, a young guy that came in and decided he was going to buy into what I was talking about, invest his money. And today he's teaching all these people his barber school, and all these barbers. I don't want to call them a cult, but these Hispanic barbers are. And it's not a cult. It's not a cult because they're like very influential, and it's because of JC and Ralph Nicole, people like that down here. They help each other. They like help each other go into business against themselves. You know, they teach each other and help each other and loan each other money and do things for each other. And it's really amazing. And that's gentrification. See, gentrification is what we should be doing. Instead of incentivizing big developers and with taxes and grants and things like that, we should be incentivizing local entrepreneurs like Ray over here, who's buying buildings and fixing them up. You know, or like so many people that are around here that come to our meetings here at Wax Space twice a month. We have meetings, and it's the 12 steps to town making. And basically, it's a support group that meets right here. And the support group supports each other. And it's not just developers, it's all people in the community. Remember, I said it takes a whole community to build a building, right? We need the support of everybody. That's how this building got built. This building here got built, financed, and occupied by you. You know, not by me. So, that's my story here, and it's a good story, you know, because it's of us, you know. It's not of somebody else coming to town telling us what we need, you know, coming in and giving money to the Education Foundation and the Chamber of Commerce and paying off our politicians and stuff. And so the more education that you have, for solutions, okay, not just being against whatever comes, because if you're against, you're going to lose. You got to have a better solution. Oh, by the way, that little building that JC has, that little building, on the tax rolls, we measure these things on the tax rolls. The new Costco down on Highway 67, see, it's on like 17 acres, and it's on the tax rolls for $8 million. Okay, $8 million divided by 17 acres is like $450,000 per acre. It's $450,000. I can tell you right now, $450,000 will not pay for our infrastructure and our schools and our roads. JC's little building down there is on the tax rolls for $3 million per acre. See, one makes us rich, cities and locals, and one bankrupts us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that talk and for kind of sharing more about the development group that meets here and really what's happened here at Tyler Station. We may have time for a few questions if you want to answer some.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for all the work that you guys have done here. So I live just up the street. One of our concerns is this is beautiful and we're in a near transit-oriented transit. Our concern is smaller neighborhoods, what's going to happen in response land,
Yeah.
and then we find ourselves surrounded by apartments.
First of all, first thing is, don't let them replat the lots. Don't let them replat the lots. You know, you can't build over a lot line. That's simple. You can't replat the lots. But you got to have a solution for density and affordable housing and workforce housing. And there's a whole story we have on that. I'm working on homeless housing right now and other things. So don't let them replat the lots. Put a lid on it, whatever that is. One of the best urban cities in the whole United States is South Beach, Florida. Okay, there's 50,000 people that live there in 1.5 square miles. It's a little bitty. And 200,000 more a week can come if you've ever been to South Beach. It's a crazy place. But it's the perfect urban city. Everything is short, except on the beach where they've messed it up with new tall stuff. Not the Art Deco hotels, but the new tall stuff. But it's very short. It's small, so there's not a lot of big parking lots. You don't need them. And so it's a high density city. It's very high density because they'll talk to us all the time about we need to build density. But then you got to build a parking lot. So there's this balance. Who gets the benefit of that? The brokers and the developers get the benefit of that, not the people. So that's one thing. Keep the lots small, put a lid on it, and then you yourself create your own developers. You have to become your own, like in Elmwood right now. I mean, Elmwood is so beautiful. It's such a great little place in downtown Elmwood. If you just filled in all those parking lots with little 1- and 2-story buildings, just like on Jefferson, or like Davis used to be, I mean, just fill in like that, it'll be beautiful. And there wouldn't be a parking problem on the streets, bleeding into the neighborhoods. But you could be small, like the restaurant might be, like I can imagine a steakhouse over there that's 800 square feet. In Duncanville right now, I have a hamburger place and a bar that's in 900 square feet, and they do $2 million a year. $2 million a year out of 900 square feet. I have a trailer at my DeSoto marketplace that sells Cajun food that does $25,000 a week out of a trailer. So the big fat restaurants cause problems in the neighborhoods because there's no one there during the week, and then on the weekends or when they come, then they explode, and then there's people parking in your neighborhood and throwing beer bottles on your sidewalks and all that kind of stuff.
I just wanted to share that our neighborhood, which is called Vernon, is with Ray and myself, and are working with the neighbors to the north, which is South Edgefield. I'd like to invite, I know Wynwood, I know Elmwood North, to have a discussion about an overlay, because I think that's a missing element here that would protect setbacks, height structure. So if anybody's interested in talking after this, but we want to start that process of getting a PD overlay for this area. Like you said, friendly to Elmwood.
That's a good.
Elmwood is working on their downtown,
So-
but there's parts of Elmwood that would stay kind of unprotected.
Right. So here's another thing you can do, because we always talk about density and keeping the character. So imagine this. In ADUs, does everybody know what an ADU is? Accessory dwelling unit, the mother-in-law's quarters. So if you did this, imagine Bishop Arts today without all the tall, crazy-looking buildings that are skinny. I mean, that the houses over there, we allowed them to make a house into an up-and-down duplex and then a garage apartment. So you could have allowed the locals to build wealth and yet have the garage apartment in 200-300 square feet. Oh, and by the way, the person in the garage apartment, 2 or 3, might be the busboy working at one of the restaurants down there who could ride their bicycle back and forth to work, don't have to have a car living in the suburbs to drive in and put more pressure on our parking. See, all of this works together. Everything works together. So if you build it with the end in mind, so you have to have the picture of the end in mind, what you see. And so we could easily take care of our affordable housing by doing things like that. And you know what? You know who'd get the wealth? You would, and you would, and you would. You could get you'd have that extra income, and you don't have to have a big property management company or a big real estate investment trust to do that. It's the locals. So if I want to rent a space to somebody cheap because I like the busboy that I know down at Oddfellows, then I could do that.
Well, Monte, to your point, it sounds like you're talking about the true value of ownership rather than renting. I remember when I moved to a cliff in '79, there were any number of businesses where the owner of the business also owned the building.
Yeah.
If they didn't live upstairs or behind, they lived within walking distance of the building. And when they retired or died or moved on, they were able to pass
Yeah.
generational wealth of home someone has,
Yes.
even in a business.
Yeah.
And can you speak more to that, because
Yeah.
corporations and these nameless spaces entities from out of town.
Yeah, so he's talking about generational wealth owning real estate. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't trust Wall Street. So I invest in my company and in my local real estate. And that's how I get my net worth, my wealth. And my dad was a carpenter, my mom was a telephone operator. I grew up at Polk and Camp Wisdom. That's where I came from. So I earned wealth by one little thing at a time over time. But he's talking about generational wealth where the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker used to have 2 units above, and they would rent them out. You know, they would either live there or they would rent them, or one of the employees would rent them. And we've got a couple of donut stores, and JC's building is like that. So he's got spaces in the back where, you know, he can rent, and he's building wealth instead of renting space. In these restaurants, think about the restaurants. I think about Bolsa, you know, which I miss, you know, and I miss several of them I won't mention today, but that are gone now. But Bolsa built a brand on a location in a building they could have bought for $500,000, okay, a while ago, and they didn't buy it, okay, because they couldn't, because we should be incentivizing for them to buy it. And then over time, the owners of that just got burnt out. There's more to this than that, but I'm giving you the short story. The owners just got burnt out, okay, by giving all their money to the landlord. And then the building came up because they did so good, it was worth now $2.5 million. So they had nothing. Their brand is built to the location. They can't just pick up and leave. Who owned Bolsa? The landlord, not the entrepreneurs. And so the entrepreneurs just give up. They lose their enthusiasm. They lose their hope. You know, they lose, you know, if you own something, you know your children are going to get it. You know, my daughter's here today. Over here, this is my daughter, Amris, who's taking over my company here in the next year or so. Maybe quicker than that, but because I'm still going to work, but I'm never going to quit working. But the point is that you can pass that wealth on to those generations, and we don't have that kind of, you know, passing on of the generation, and therefore the middle class today, the middle class is shrinking, right? I mean, how many billionaires do we have and trillionaires? We got trillionaires now. And the middle class is shrinking, and when the middle class shrinks, you know what it does to the homeless? It pushes them below the zero line. So as the middle class shrinks, everybody pushes down. And so part of the solution to homelessness is raising the middle class so there's place to come back up. And there's many more things to talk about with that, but go ahead.
What do you think the effect of the Lower Dallas plan will have on the future land use?
Plans to me are generally a waste of time. What I would like to see is this, a conceptual plan. Because who would have known where we're going to be today 5 years ago? Before the Walmart effect, the Amazon effect, the COVID effect, it changed our retail, it changed our lives. Who would have known? A plan that we did a few years ago is completely worthless. And most of the time those plans get left on the shelves. I'm for like doing conceptual plans, okay, and then doing the final plans around entrepreneurs and developers who are going to develop in neighborhoods who are going to develop their town. For instance, if a plan's going on over here right now, it should be planned around what we want to build in Elmwood, what we want to do with this, what we want to do to preserve the character of these houses over here. The plan should reflect, you know, what we can actually do. But when you do a plan, you know, like in the Bishop Arts, you know, what's happened in the Bishop Arts and what's happened on Singleton and Fort Worth Avenue and all of those places was our policy. We set the policy that did that. We changed the zoning, and then not only did we change the zoning, we incentivized it with TIF funds and other things. We made it happen. It didn't say that it had to be quality multifamily, because a lot of it's not. It was built by other people that are from somewhere else. It's a financial architecture. It's not town making. And some of it's good. I don't want to bash every big, you know, developer or anything. It's not my point, because you know, we need rich people and middle people and poor. I mean, but the rich used to have a relationship with the middle class that was better because the rich used to realize how the middle class kept them rich, and something's happened with that. And so, you know, I don't know if I answered your question. I got lost. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what's going to happen to the Belmont?
I heard that the people, a newspaper guy, Steve Brown from the Dallas Morning News, called me the other day and told me that the people that own the Thompson and the National downtown where the Thompson is, are buying it as a hotel. And, you know, I hope that's the case. You know, I hope that's the case.
Thanks to Monte for just believing in the businesses, entrepreneurs, and really making this thing happen. And so if we could give him a round of applause.
Thank you.